It's Team Snail versus Team Snake as we discuss two Sega freebies, Snail Maze and SEGA Swirl. Plus, we talk about other free offerings from Sega on this totally not free, first on Patreon, then later released to the public episode of Sega Talk. Sega Bits presents Sega Talk, a podcast talking all things Sega! With your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. Say what?
Hello and welcome to welcome to episode 124 of Sega Talk. I'm Barry. With me is George.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. And on this episode, we are talking about two freebies. And when we wrap up, we're going to be touching on some other freebies as well. But before we do that, George, talk about something that's not free.
There's a thing called Patreon. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a website called Patreon, but if you guys go to patreon.com, you guys could support this show and watch the episodes early. You could even tell us what to talk about, and maybe you have an idea for an episode. The last episode we did was unreleased Sonic games. Maybe you have an idea that you think is really interesting and you want to pitch it to us. If we find it interesting as well, you guys could do that on patreon.com/SegaBits. You also get the audio and video version a day early, depending on the tier, so check it out. There's a lot of good stuff there. Yeah.
Good. Well done. Well done. So on this episode, we're going to be talking about a couple of games. Sega has a long history of giving away games to those who own their consoles. Of course, you have the always popular demo discs, and then the highly successful console bundles with free games included. And then there are those games where you're given them simply because you own the console. In the case of this episode, we're discussing two of them. It's 1986's Snail Maze for the Sega Master System and 2000's SEGA Swirl for the Sega Dreamcast. And there are quite a few similarities between Snail Maze and SEGA Swirl. Both were included with, or in the case of Snail Maze, within the console. Their respective consoles bookended Sega's Western console releases. They star ground-crawling creatures. Snails are kind of like the snakes of bugs, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah? I'm trying to think of like bugs that are like snakes, but they all have little tiny feet. I can't think of any slithering... I don't know. And I don't even think snails are bugs. They're something.
No, there's something else.
Know.
They're their own, whatever kingdom of things or whatever.
They're
squishy
bugs.
Ones.
Squishy bugs. That's what we call them. And they are both highly addictive puzzle games with small but dedicated fan bases. George, which team are you on? Team Snake or Team Snail?
I'm a Snake guy because I actually did play SEGA Swirl a lot on the Dreamcast. It was literally it was free on the demo disc, and I was really into the idea of getting those demo discs. So I would play it with people at the house. It's just a really simple, very simple puzzle game that it's always fun to put on and play. And I can't think of any other puzzle game that was like Tetris. I'm sure there is. I think there was New Tetris or whatever, but you had to go buy it.
Right.
This was free, and outside of whatever Tetris game, there was a Tetris game on Dreamcast, wasn't there?
There was, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was called Next Tetris, I think.
Yeah, there you go. They're trying to make it next generation. So to me, this was my puzzle game that you go to just put in really quick. It was free, so you didn't have to go buy it. So that's why I never bought New Tetris or whatever, or I might have owned it. Because I always have to own at least one puzzle game because it's one of those, you just put it in and everyone understands how to play it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it is very simple to play, very addictive. I played SEGA Swirl quite a bit because, like you said, it came on a variety of discs. Whereas with Snail Maze, I didn't play that until I finally got a Sega Master System, which I have back here. And I didn't even know about like the hidden game, or that it depended on what console version you got. So I lucked out. I had a Snail Maze Master System, and I played it. I enjoyed it. We'll get into both of them. To be quite honest, we're not actually comparing the two. Like, it's very clear that Snail Maze is a much smaller game than SEGA Swirl. I mean, SEGA Swirl has its own menu system. It has a variety of releases, whereas Snail Maze, it's a much smaller game, and it was released, as mentioned, in 1986, and the only way to play it was to own a specific hardware variation of the Sega Master System. And so that's right, not every Sega Master System could play Snail Maze. So it's almost kind of like the most expensive Master System game if you're not thinking about like some rarity. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to play Snail Maze, you got to own the Master System, and you have to own a specific one. And if you're some kind of collector nowadays, and you're like, oh, I've had the Alex Kidd one for years, I really wish I had the Snail Maze one. Well, you're going to have to hunt it down. You're going to have to buy a whole new console. So it's kind of an investment. So to understand Snail Maze, one must first understand BIOS. And I never thought on this podcast we'd be talking about BIOS, but here we are. BIOS stands for Basic Input-Output System. And this is what loads all things on a system, such as hardware settings. Emulators will sometimes require the original console BIOS to make settings that are fed into the emulator so that it can work with the game software. So I don't know, George, if you've ever dealt with emulators, but I'm sure you remember that, like I think there were ones like Kega and some other ones where you needed to download the Sega CD BIOS, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
I literally just, well, computers have BIOS obviously, but like
For
I
sure.
literally just dealt with BIOS today because getting this Bluetooth thing to work, I had to disable a BIOS thing. So I just 10 minutes ago I was literally in the BIOS screen on my computer. So, but yeah. I used playing around with BIOS also. You have to download BIOS sometimes, especially for MAME emulators to get them to work. So yeah, definitely know about that.
BIOS are everywhere, and we don't even think about them sometimes. But systems with BIOS will load without a disk or cartridge inserted, and they'll usually display a startup screen and then a message or a system menu. And, you know, it's interesting. You look at all the systems that Sega put out, and most Sega systems have BIOS and startup screens. However, interestingly, the Sega Genesis Mega Drive does not, as does the Game Gear does not. Instead, everything needed to run a game that usually would exist in the BIOS is instead on the Genesis or Mega Drive cartridge. And so that's why, and I always kind of like, I didn't really think about that until I was writing these notes, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of lame. Like, imagine, you turn on a Genesis without a cartridge, and I'll do that sometimes to make sure I have the right video input setting, and all I can look for is that flicker, because there's no logo that comes up. There's no message saying, like, welcome to Sega Genesis, please insert your cartridge. I wonder why that doesn't have that. I don't know. It's weird. BIOS will offer up regional differences. So in the case of Sega CD, these differences are pretty dramatic with different logos, music, and sound effects. Of course, notably the Mega Drive Mini 2, if you change the region and then load up the credits, it will actually emulate that region's Sega CD startup menu for the BIOS. So it's kind of a fun way to see how each country or each region showcased the Sega CD sound and video. Of course, on the Saturn, you get different startups. I think they all have that rocket ship main menu, though. But yeah, it will give you different logos, music, sound effects. For the Saturn and Dreamcast, different regions will see altered logos, different default languages. These three systems, they have their own menus. They allow players to manage their files, change time and date settings, play music CDs, or launch software. And in the case of Master System, the BIOS includes a startup screen with a message for the user. So we're going to actually, we're going to watch the BIOS.
All right.
Let's do it.
All right, I'm going to play it.
It's like our podcast is starting up.
Right? It's that sound effect.
See, there you
Enjoy.
go. That's what you get. You get a really weird enjoy. You get a really weird message.
Is it both the same one right here, or is it just like the regional difference? The second one that plays.
The second one is showing you what happens when a cartridge is in. So that whole like that startup song is in the console. It's not on the cartridge, which I wonder saves them a little space. It also makes me wonder, like, why didn't the Genesis... I guess Sonic 1 came much later, but imagine if the Genesis had preloaded into it that Sega Scream startup for every game. I don't know. They could have done that. So before we move on, what Sega system do you think has the best startup theme and features?
I like the Sega Saturn. I don't know why. It always blew my mind. Would that be considered a BIOS where it has you could play your CD and it has like
yeah.
And you could play it back in slow motion, and it has all these like weird little features, and then it has a little spaceship screen. It's like a screensaver, really, and you could just play it in the background if you wanted to on the loop forever.
That's right.
That was when I was younger. I was like, and it kind of blew my mind. I don't know why, but I really, really liked it. I thought it really left an impression on me. So definitely the Sega Saturn.
Oh, yeah. I love the Japanese Saturn startup specifically. And then when you get into the menu, it's the same for all regions. But there are just so many more features in there, like you said, with the music. It was kind of a downgrade with the Dreamcast. And I didn't know at the time, because I owned a Saturn after the Dreamcast. But I remember people, like hardcore fans, complaining about how they were like, oh, the CD playback's kind of lame. And I'm like, what? It's just CDs. But then when I got the Saturn, I'm like, oh, the controller itself has the CD controls on the controller. It's super easy to use. I also really like the Sega CD startups, all of them. I think the music just is so good on the Sega CD.
For sure, it is.
The American one I'm partial to. I think that's my favorite. But yeah, it's kind of wild too, because you can manage your save data on the Sega CD, but it's not very user-friendly. I never really understood it when I was younger. Nowadays, I kind of get it, but it's like there's stored memory, and then there's like battery memory or something like that, and you can like lose it if you leave your console unplugged. But yeah, so the Master System, it was unique in that it had a BIOS, but no real options, just instructions for how to use the console. However, hidden within the BIOS was often a free game. So thanks to the website The Cutting Room Floor, here is a list of all the secret free games hidden within the Sega Master System BIOS. So I'll blow through these. I'm not going to read all the technical terms. But in the US and Europe, version 1.3, you would hold up 1 and 2 on the controller on the instruction screen to play Snail Maze. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Version 2 in 87, it doesn't have Snail Maze. I don't know what it has, but it doesn't have it. Japanese version 2.1 in 87 does not have Snail Maze. US and Europe 2.4 has Hang On and Safari Hunt. And what's cool, it says this and the next version will load Snail Maze if up 1 and 2 are held on controller 1 when the BIOS intro is finished. So it's actually like it's Snail Maze and then some, which is kind of cool. Same goes for version 3.4 in US and Europe with Hang On. So you actually get Snail Maze there. US and Europe 1988 with Missile Defense 3D. And this was released in Super System bundles that did not have the game as a separate cart. And unfortunately, Snail Maze is absent from here. And Missile Defense 3D is kind of the weaker 3D titles that existed at the time. So I'd say this is kind of this is the one you don't want.
Right. I agree on that.
Master System 2 had a slightly altered version of Alex Kidd in Miracle World. I think it lacked like the ending or something like that to save on space. The European Master System 2 in 91 had a slightly altered version of Sonic the Hedgehog with the game's ending sequence removed to fit the BIOS. And let's see, well, this and the blue, it's just something else. And then the Korean...
Like the Korean version, right?
Yeah, the Korean Super Game Boy Aladdin Boy came with Alex Kidd in Miracle World. Aladdin Boy. Do you want to play the Aladdin Boy? Oh, I love the Aladdin Boy. I grew up playing the Aladdin Boy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you imagine growing up playing the Aladdin Boy and like all of the Sega systems are all like, isn't all of them Aladdin-based names? Even like the over there, like didn't they also have an Aladdin name for the Master System? I mean, the Mega Drive.
I think they did something like that, and then there was like Jafar and Princess Jasmine. No. But what's interesting is Japan actually lacked these free games hidden within the BIOS, and in all the research I was doing, I never uncovered why games like Snail Maze were included. I initially suspected it had something to do with the same legal reasons that the Sega Astro City arcade cabinets had the game Datori-kun, or Dot Run, installed, and Datori-kun was a downscaled port of Sega's own Head-On, not Hang-On, but Head-On.
Yeah, Head-On.
And was created in response...
Directly to your forehead.
Yeah, exactly. And it was created in response to Japan's electrical appliance and material control law, which required arcade cabinets to include a working arcade game at point of sale. And Datori-kun was included on most Sega JAMA-compatible arcade boards in the early 90s and were meant to be disposable, and so thus it's actually very rare to actually see the game playable in arcades, and boards are also equally rare, as most were just thrown out or stripped for parts. The board was as bare bones and cheap as possible, featuring 256 by 192 resolution, 8 colors, and no sound. And this free game was actually included on Sega's Astro City Mini. So we have a look at the Astro City Mini booting up the game here. And it's kind of unsettling once you get into the game because it's just silent.
Oh, no sound?
No sound.
I think I saw this for like, I totally forgot, but I remember playing this for a little bit and I was just like, okay. Like... Yeah, okay, this is...
It's just to satisfy a law that was later repealed or ratified or something. So the law went away, I think, in the late 90s or early 2000. But, that's just what it is. But you can imagine if you're an arcade operator, you get the new Astro City cabinet, there's a board in there, you just rip the board out and like throw it in the storeroom or set it aside. It gets lost, it gets damaged, you might need a part off of it, so you do that. So
how much
yeah,
do you think this cost?
I don't know, and I actually checked eBay and I didn't see it.
Oh, that's not
because
good.
I don't
eBay,
know.
If eBay isn't trying to make money off of these, they're probably that rare because they make money off the most bizarre things.
I see one.
How much do they got?
It's not that bad. They want 50.
Oh,
so that's not bad. So it might be one of those things where it's rare but not expensive. I mean, those things do exist. It's like how many people want this? Well, not many. But yeah, it's just a board. There's another one here for 90. But remember, this is like the most basic, boring game. So yeah, you're dropping $50 to $90 on something that you can play on the Astro City Mini here. So it's more of a curiosity, I think, if anything. So does 1986's Snail Maze exist for similar reasons? It's possible, but not confirmed. I mean, given no free games were included on Japanese consoles and only on Western hardware, perhaps Sega included these games to maybe cover their butts in case there's some sort of international law that comes down. But what do you think? Why do you think Sega stuck these free games on Western Master Systems?
I feel like when they manufactured it here, someone snuck it in there. Like, is Snail Maze, is that even made in Japan? Is it a Japanese studio that made it? So
no one knows who made it.
Okay, so I'm thinking personally that somebody in the West, when they were manufacturing the board, snuck it in there as a little kind of like when people make art. Like Disney, they add sex or some little thing, and people think it's some nefarious thing, but it's really just an artist board trying to sneak in stuff into their work. I'm sure you've done that with your graphic designs. You try to sneak a little image in the back and nobody noticed.
I've snuck. I've sneaked.
That's
but
what I think.
Yeah, you make a good point, because I don't think this startup screen is the same as in Japan. So clearly this was something that was created for Western territories. I mean, the text alone reads like someone with a grasp of English wrote it.
Yes.
So they could have said, like, hey guys, this board has a little extra space. I've been tinkering around with some game development. Like, it's entirely possible that Snail Maze was made by someone who made games for the Master System, and it was just like a little side thing, like, can we stick it on? But I've never actually seen or read a reason or why, so I guess no one knows yet. Snail Maze never had an official physical release outside of being preloaded on hardware, and despite M2's efforts in recent years, the game has never actually seen a re-release, and it kind of did, but we'll get to it. To play the game, like I said, you must own a Master System with Snail Maze on it, and as we discussed, not everyone had a Master System with Snail Maze. They might have Alex Kidd or something. When the Sega logo appears at startup, with no cartridge in the machine, players must press up 1 and 2 at the same time, and then they are greeted by the usual startup message, which immediately slides to the side to reveal a large blue maze board with a small orange snail and a yellow shell. And players must make their way through a large maze to reach the goal before the timer runs out. And while this plays out, some of the most catchy music ever composed plays. Players must make their way through a dozen mazes before the game resets to the BIOS screen. So let's look at some beautiful gameplay footage and listen to some of that wonderful music.
All right,
let's watch one maze.
All right. This is from World of Long Plays. Just giving them
they're great.
Oh yeah.
So this person knows what they're doing.
Oh yeah, they're a professional.
And I will say,
I would just put my finger and try to do it, and then go, all right.
No, it's a very tricky maze. So that's
beautiful.
That's it. And despite not being advertised to console owners or people buying it, Sega did tease the hidden game through their tips line. And here's actually 2 tips letters that Sega sent out to Master System owners who inquired about it. So there's the Sega Master System. Yeah, it says, this information package that was provided from Sega has some helpful hints, and it goes on. At the bottom it says, there is also a game included with the system that does not require a game cartridge or card. Here's how. Be sure existing game cartridge or card is removed from the Sega Master System. Insert the control pad into Control 1 on the power base. Power up the Sega System. Press and hold the control pad in the up direction and buttons 1 and 2 simultaneously. Use the control pad to move the snail to the goal. Ron. That's Ron's message. Nice. And then the other letter is a little, I think it's actually, it's written differently. So yeah, this is from Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl.
And this one's interesting because it says, in appreciation for your patience, Sega of America would like to thank you with an additional game for your Sega system. This game does not require a game cartridge or a card. Be sure the existing game cartridge, blah, 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 insert the control pad, power up the system, press and hold the control pad, and then use the control pad to move the object to the goal. They don't call it the snail, the object. There are 12 mazes to master. Once again, thank you and good luck. And what I like about this one is it's almost like you went through something, like maybe you were on hold with them, or like a power cable didn't work, and they were like, you know what, for your troubles, here's a free game. And it's like, well, you didn't give it to me. It was there the whole time.
It's been on my console. Yeah.
You think there were kids? You think there were kids who were like, Sega, like, sent it to my console? How'd they do that?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I literally thought that, like, man, if I turn off the console, I'm sure that the game is still, like, the characters are playing still with, like, without me playing it, when I turn it on, it all restarts. Kind of like a movie theater idea, like how Sega used to present their ending for their games. So
That's how I felt with. I felt like that with Tails. Like I thought someone was remotely controlling him.
Like in like beaming it, like someone at Sega is like, oh, Barry wants to play again.
Yeah, I literally, because I was like, well, how'd they do this? Like he's not always following me; he's doing his own thing. This is weird. Yeah. So, but hey, so how would you have reacted if you called Sega like about a broken power cable, and not only did they solve your problem, but they tell you the secret of Snail Maze? Like, would you hold this information close to your chest, or would you go to school and be like, hey guys, I got something?
I'd be at school the next day bragging to everyone, but sadly the Master System wasn't a game system that like people at school, and it was I think past our school time when we did this. We were more like the 90s, mid 90s. So, but if I was the age and people had the Master System and I knew people that had it, oh, for sure, I'd be the first one to brag about the sacred knowledge that I know.
Right. It's like the kid who comes to school and he's like, guys, after midnight on the local radio station, they will play The Roof is on Fire uncensored, so you can hear the MF word. Like, I remember that going around. I remember people, like, talking about video game secrets. I remember kids making up shit. Like there was this one kid who he said, oh, I have a Game & Watch, but every time you get it to a new level, a new screen appears. Like, it gets taller. It's like the kid was thinking of the DS before it existed, like a DDDDDS.
He went on to work at Nintendo and make the DS.
I don't know. I actually looked him up the other day. I don't know what he's up to, but he's definitely not playing a Game & Watch with like 30 screens. So despite being locked to the Master System console, fans have made the game available through emulation, fan-made cartridges, and yes, this like tiny little game was put on cartridge and given an unofficial boxed release, and in 2004, a fan ported the game to the MSX computer. The game also...
The MXX computer does not deserve a classic game like this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess that's not a fan. That's an enemy of Sega fans. Took our beloved Slimy Snail away from us. The game also appeared on the handheld Electric Games system by Coleco in 2006. So Sonic 06 is coming out to the Xbox 360, and here comes Snail Maze by Coleco. The device held 20 Master System and Game Gear games, and it went by other names too, including the PlayPal, not to be confused with PayPal, and the Pocket Gear. And look at this thing. I looked it up online. I can't find it on eBay or anything. It just looks like crap, doesn't it?
It does. The
Coleco.
I didn't know, like, what is up with Coleco? That's a manufacturer I never really looked into, but it's like, are they like like, you know, when you go to like a swap meet and you see those like 2001 in one game consoles?
Right. Well, you know, I'll tell you about them. So Coleco, I didn't have it on the notes, but they're known for Cabbage Patch dolls.
Oh.
So they're a toy manufacturer. They were founded in 1932, but they also made the ColecoVision video game console, and they made a handful of games. Actually, they're on Sega Retro, so they made Carnival and Zaxxon for the Atari 2600. So they ported a couple Sega arcade games. They also ported Buck Rogers, Zaxxon Super Game, Atom. I don't know what the Atom is, but it's a thing.
This is so crazy.
Coleco Atom. It's a home computer and expansion device for the ColecoVision. So it can turn your ColecoVision into a computer, the Atom.
What do you think about Coleco, like as a, I guess, console or computer? I don't know what they would be considered, a manufacturer. Like, I've seen them on like retro collecting YouTuber videos where they're like the ColecoVision, and they like make these long videos.
Yeah, it's interesting because it says here that they actually went out of business in the late 80s and were purchased by Hasbro, who now owns Kenner. And so actually the little handheld we're looking at here was actually reintroduced by Hasbro. So Hasbro made a deal with Sega. But what I find so odd is that they branded it with Coleco when it holds 20 Sega games. And so it's like this toy company bought a computer company, and then they used that computer company branding to release a handheld of Sega games, and they put the computer company's name on the handheld.
It's the branding is all over the place.
It's the weirdest thing. I kind of want one now, but it has Snail Maze,
Right.
and I think it's its own game. It was officially licensed, so it's the only other official way to enjoy Snail Maze. So, what are your final thoughts on Snail Maze, and what is the legacy of this great game?
Well, it needs to be re-released. I think Sega should just if they ever, how they did those vintage collections, and then they had the Sega Ages. I think every game that they release under their Sega Ages brand should literally let you play it if you do the on startup, if you do the up and hold 2 buttons or whatever. It's just all of a sudden you're playing Snail Maze. That would be interesting. I think
I'd love that.
Make it like a, what do they say, like a little extra secret game in every game. But the reason I don't think they haven't done it is because it's not a Japanese game. Like you said, it was only for Western audiences. Yeah. And Sega Ages, sadly, is very Japanese-centric.
Right. I think
audiences.
One of I wouldn't call it a failing, but maybe one of the, I don't know, with the M2 stuff, is it's very clearly hardcore Sega fans, but hardcore Japanese Sega fans. Right. So when you see those videos when they're unveiling the Astro City or the minis, which are sitting behind me here, it's always these stories from these huge Sega fans, but they're from Japan, and then they're like, oh, and for the American one we put Clay Fighter, and it's like, well, guys, we don't really like Clay Fighter.
Yeah, nobody.
We it would really help to have an Aaron Weber equivalent Sega fan kind of tapping on their shoulder for the Western stuff. I don't know. But whatever.
I did want to ask before we move on to the Dreamcast stuff. What built-in games does your Master System have?
Mine has Snail Maze.
Oh, just Snail Maze, nothing else? It doesn't have
nothing
Hang On
else.
Okay.
No, mine's an older model. It's a little finicky though. The video plug is finicky, and I don't know if the 3D glasses I own, the glasses themselves are broken, or if the adapter is broken, but it doesn't really matter. I'm not missing out.
Mine was the Hang On one. That's why I was wondering.
Oh, but you might have Snail Maze on it.
Right. I think it said right there it did have it. Yeah.
It did. So I think you need to do something specific. So you should try that after this. Maybe you'll be greeted with Snaily the Snail. All right, so hold on. I don't want you to get whiplash. It's kind of like in, with the Flash. I have to hold your head and be very careful with moving you into the future. So you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, we're going to jump ahead to the year 2000.
What? The future?
That is the future. So the Sega Dreamcast is almost 2 years old, and Swirly the Snake is here to shake things up. Developed by Tremor Entertainment, SEGA Swirl was a free single and multiplayer puzzle game. The game was originally released to Windows-based PCs as a standalone program and web-based Shockwave title, but perhaps the most popular version of this game was on the Sega Dreamcast. SEGA Swirl is similar to 1985's Chain Shot, aka, and I believe this is how you say it, it's spelled same game, but it's Samegame. It was developed by Kunaki Morisuke Moribe. Samegame initially saw release on Fujitsu's FM8 and FM7 platforms by way of the Japanese PC magazine called Gekken ASC2. And I couldn't figure out if it was a disc was given there or if it was one of those, and we talked about this in the past, where you could actually type in games, where it was lines of code. So I don't know how they did it, but it's possible. The game was ported over the years to many platforms in Japan and abroad, with mechanics being slightly altered as new versions were created. In its most basic form, however, Samegame sees a rectangular field filled with randomly placed colored blocks in 3 colors. By selecting groups of same colors, these colors are removed, and then unsupported blocks will drop down and shift over, with the goal being to eliminate as many blocks as possible, and I think you might even be penalized if you remove one at a time because you're not getting any points.
Right.
SEGA Swirl is actually one among dozens of variations of the game, many of which carry different names, and I'd argue SEGA Swirl is probably the most well-known one, but if you scroll down, so I have the Wikipedia page here, scroll down to versions, it's a list.
Yeah.
Look at that. Isn't that insane?
Yeah, there's a lot.
Look
so
at that.
I'm assuming anyone can make their own version of these Sami game, right? Like,
yeah, no one owns... I don't think anyone owns it. No one's going to be suing you. But yeah, it's on Amigo, it's on Windows, Java, Game Boy. It was actually... This is what's really cool. So it was actually published by Hudson in 1997 to the Game Boy. And later on, so if you scroll way down here, you're going to see... maybe not way down. You're going to see Bomberman 64 in 2001, which was also by Hudson. And so
Right.
Bomberman 64 has a Samegame minigame on it. Yeah.
I never played that one, actually.
And there's others here. I mean, it's a very interesting list to scroll through. But of course, Sega Swirl's there. Other names include Spore Cubes, Pocket Pop, Bubble Shot, Bubble Bang. That's my favorite one. Bubble Drop, Color Balls, Clickomania HTML, Cube Crush. That sounds like Candy Crush. Sounds exactly like it. So yeah, tons and tons of titles. And most recently, according to this list at least, Samegame 1K released in 2017 in JavaScript.
Who made a JavaScript game in like 2017?
Alpha Males.
I guess you're right. Oh, it's on GitHub.
Yeah, you can play it.
So it's free. You could literally just download it on GitHub.
Yeah, it's the freest game that ever existed. So I have gameplay footage here. We can have it playing while we talk a bit about the game. So SEGA Swirl was developed by Scott Hawkins. And Scott, I looked into him, and this guy's a superstar. So Scott was a senior producer at Sega of America, and he began as a tester. And I think there's someone else we know who started as a tester. Didn't Julian Melfeld?
Yeah.
He was the senior PR guy for Sega of America.
Yeah.
He went on to Facebook and working with the Oculus, and now Meta. Well, he was at, I think it was Facebook when
it was
he was
Facebook
there. And
at
then
the time.
He's with Warner Brothers now. Warner Brothers doing like the Lord of the Rings and the Looney Tunes and stuff. But yeah, he started. So this guy, Scott, started as a tester, and then he went on to be a producer, a senior producer. His credits include working as a tester for Calibre and Virtua Fighter, so he was really their 32X tester. He was also a producer on Comix Zone and Sonic CD for the PC, and produced several other Sega PC ports. Hawkins became so synonymous with Sega Swirl, which makes up half of his Sega credits, that Quake 3 Arena, which he worked on as a senior producer, has him credited as Scott Swirl Hawkins. So that gives you one reason to view the credits on that. You can see a reference to Sega Swirl. And he was also a producer on Condemned, one of his later roles, which was recently on an episode of Sega Talk.
Right.
So, looking over Scott's background, it's clear his strengths were PC and online console games. So why do you think Sega tapped Scott to create Sega Swirl, and why do you think this game even exists?
I'm actually wondering why they obviously had to spend money on it, and it's funny because it felt like they didn't know how to give it out. Like, they just put it on like any disc that was free, like web browser, put Sega Swirl on it. The Dreamcast demo disc that came in pack, put it on there. So I'm wondering, I'm actually wondering the same thing. It's actually a really fun game, but like,
yeah,
what is Sega like? What, like, obviously they weren't making money off of this. It was all free. It's like a promo.
Yeah, it is very interesting because so this did not launch with the console in '99. It came the following year, but it also does not rely on SegaNet. You don't need to have any you don't need to purchase like Sega's exclusive whatever to play it. As long as you have an internet connection, you can play it. My guess is that they wanted to include some sort of playable game to give people an idea of what it's like to play online in the most basic form without having to have servers set up. Maybe they wanted to give some incentive to, like... It is interesting, though, because they could have given us just a web browser, and they did with web browser 1.0, but with 2.0 they included SEGA Swirl and its own application. It's not embedded within the browser, so when you launch the browser disk, you need to pick SEGA Swirl. So it sits alongside it. It's not built into it. I think they kind of missed a trick by having SEGA Swirl somehow integrated into the browser so that you could boot it up, much like when you got like Windows 95 and it had a free game included on it. I think it was Hover. And then there was like Minesweeper and things like that. But it is an oddity. I honestly think it's just a very I don't want to say it's a cheaply produced, but it was cheap to produce, and it showcases 1-to-4 player gameplay. It showcases the very basic online gameplay that you can present, and and maybe it's something they wanted to throw on there. They're like, oh, get parents addicted to it. They'll maybe like want to start trying some other games. So
I think also you could show this as a, like, look how easy it is to make Dreamcast games. Because remember, the Saturn was hard to develop for. Maybe get some developers to see, we can make very low budget games on the Dreamcast very fast and cheap.
And I think that's probably what it was too, because Scott was probably pitching to them, hey, this costs next to nothing to make, and we can include it as an incentive, but we can also make a little money off of it through its inclusion on we'll get to it, but Palm OS. But yeah, so SEGA Swirl, it was bundled with the Dreamcast Magazine demo discs in the US and the UK. And most famously, it appeared on the web browser 2.0 disc, as well as the retail release of Sega Smash Pack Volume 1, which makes version the one paid release of the Dreamcast version. It sits right at the top, too. Like when you boot up the game, it has that cartoony TV, and then Sega Swirl's sitting right up there.
The king, next to peasants.
It is the king. Yeah, well, the king took his throne. He's right up there. The web browser 2.0 release was the most prevalent, as this disc was given out for free to Dreamcast owners, and it was bundled with new Dreamcast consoles. And I don't know, did you ever, because I did this a few times, you could actually reach out to Sega and they would send you the latest browser in the mail for free.
Did you
ever do
that? Yeah, I did
Yeah.
do that. You call 1-800-USA or whatever, Sega. I forgot what it was, Sega USA or USA Sega, but...
1-800-USA Sega, I think. Yeah, and there was 1 to 2.6, I think it was, and then 3, and 3 is very rare, which is weird to have a rare web browser.
Yeah, because, like... what was the updates from 2? I know 2.0, everyone had 2.0. I remember, like, everyone I ever knew had that disc. Multiple discs sometimes.
Yeah, 3.0 was Ethernet, I do believe. But yeah, I'm looking online right now, and I'm not seeing it. And I know collectors are super weird, because they're, like, going through, like, the dollar bin hoping to find a
web browser
3.0. Here's a nitwit trying to sell a 2.62 disc only for $260. 2.62 isn't rare.
This is the Netlink, but it's just the web browser for the Sega Saturn Netlink 3.0 is 30. It's brand new, 140. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's wild. But yeah, Sega Swirl was also on the 2.62. Maybe that's what 2.6. I have to look this up later. We'll do a whole episode on web browsers.
Web browser, the Sega web browser episode. Yes.
I think we should. I think there is a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. It would just be I guess SegaNet would be a better episode, and then we'll talk about the web browsers. But we can plan that after we record this. So, the Dreamcast version of the game has a real-time split-screen versus mode, which features a unique gameplay element in which one player can clear all of one color, and that clears for all players. Aside from 1 to 4 player local games, players could also partake in 2-player games via email, allowing PC players and Dreamcast players to play together.
I never
One move.
did that.
Yeah, it was one move and one email at a time. So you go, my friend in Japan. Well, he doesn't have this. Well, maybe he does, and he's playing with me. He just sent me his latest move. You know. I guess the equivalent. I think people way back in the day would play chess by mail.
Oh.
You know, so you'd send a telegram or something to a friend. It would be like knight to, and you'd have the board set up in your room, and you know. But yeah, this is the modern equivalent of chess by mail.
That's the earliest gameplay back in the 1800s or whatever, when telegrams were first invented. That's how they played online.
But just imagine that it's saved locally, so you're powering up your Dreamcast with SEGA Swirl in there just to check your email and progress one move with your friend.
That's crazy.
In the modern era, it is still possible to play this game via email, but it requires DreamPie and an altered Gmail account. And the reason for this is that modern email saw changes to email protocol as it existed 20 years ago, and thus SEGA Swirl will not play nice with like 99% of the email services out there unless additional steps are taken. And you can read all about it. There's a blog post over at the website dreamcastlive.net, but it's very technical. And to be quite honest, do you want to do that? I don't. If you find a friend who wants to, then go right ahead.
I give those guys credit for figuring all this stuff out, because it just sounds like a headache.
That's half of figuring this stuff out, is like the headache, and then it becomes a headache when you try to do it yourself. As we see in the Dreamcast version, the mascot Swirly the Snake features prominently, whereas the PC version he does not feature outside of some free wallpaper downloads. The PC version also lacks pretty graphics and features different sounds, no music, and there is no local versus mode, just computer-controlled opponents. The game saw release on the Palm OS, developed by Codefire Incorporated in association with Scott Hawkins, and saw a boxed retail release with cover art and everything. At the moment, there is one copy on eBay for a whopping $125. So that's not a free game. And the graphics are, think calculator game. Like, it is not impressive. It looks like a step up from a VMU game.
125
actually,
bucks.
Now that I think about it, I think there was a fan-made SEGA Swirl VMU game. You could download it, and it was on, like, Booyaka or something. I don't know how I guess you do different shapes instead of different colors. SEGA Swirl saw a sequel in 2006. However, it is lost to time as it appeared exclusively on PC via the GameTap service. Do you remember GameTap?
Yeah, I do remember GameTap.
It was like Netflix, right? It was like online
Early.
games, though. It was like, what's Xbox have? Game Pass.
GameTap.
Right?
Let me see. Yeah, that's what I've thought about it, but I have to now Google it.
But I remember GameTap also, it was owned by Time Warner.
Right.
And so it had an exclusive Space Ghost Coast to Coast TV series where he would actually interview video game developers and industry talent. And just like this game, those episodes were like lost for years, and to this day a few of them are still missing. I actually am one of the nerds out there who helped in the efforts to like archive them and assemble them all. So I would, like 10 years ago, I remember I was going online and I found this guy who like worked on the show, and he had an episode on his online portfolio. And so I saved it, and I'm like, I saved an episode of GameTap Space Ghost. Wild. Scott returned and developed the game with Wilco Ives Productions, Sneaky Rabbit Studios, and Elationware, I should say. It took 3 studios to release SEGA Swirl 2. The official description of SEGA Swirl 2 is as follows. The best of puzzle games combine a simple premise with gameplay that gets you hooked and keeps you coming back for more. SEGA Swirl 2 is just that. Clicking swirls is the easy part, but you'll be considering and reconsidering strategies for hours. Throw in new gameplay modes, variable colors, gravity-defying iterations, and a soundtrack by Kinetic to make for an enduring puzzle classic. The game featured 5 colors over the first game's 4 and was more like the Dreamcast original than the PC counterpart. The game saw new animations, they called it an iterator style setting, which altered the gravity of swirls being dropped, so maybe they went to the left or right. Special seasonal boards with images like hearts and pumpkins, and music from Scott's brother-in-law's band Kinetic, which did covers of popular Sega music, mainly from the Sonic franchise. So it was like Sonic CD covers. The game is lost, with no version surfacing since GameTap closed up shop.
Gosh, darn it.
I know.
I was
Lost
like, I never
media.
even played this or heard of it, so I'm now upset.
Yeah, I know. So there's 3 screenshots here, and then there's actually some footage, but it looks slick. It looks like, it looks cheesy, like super cheesy, like way too many colors, way too many not filters, but gradients and bevel and emboss and
right.
more information than you need. Look at all that. Check goals, combo.
You know what? I hope that Scott
Look at that.
just releases this online, just dumps it. I mean, he got paid for this, right, from GameTap.
Yeah. Where is it, Scott?
Yeah, just dump it online. You're the snail guy. I mean, not the snail guy, the snake guy.
The snake guy. I'll DM Sega 16 and be like, have you ever talked to Scott Hawkins, and can you convince him to leak Sega Swirl 2? Let's check out I love screenshot number 4 of the American flag. I have to salute it.
Screenshot number 4.
Or I'm sorry, not screenshot number 4, the video number 4, the featured image is the American flag.
Oh, yeah, you got to salute it. If you don't, you're a terrible person.
But you hear that music?
That's actually pretty good. This is Sega Sonic, yeah.
Yeah, it's Sonic music. But,
Who recorded this?
His brother-in-law.
No, the who recorded the game?
Oh, I don't know. It says it was extracted from a video about the complete history of Sega Swirl. And it's from Slope's Game Room. And he always gets weird stuff, so...
I like how he says, note, I don't have the game. Don't ask.
But in the corner, you can see what iterator style is, so it shows you things will drop down, and then the next time you clear it, they'll drop to the left, and they'll get smaller and smaller. You see that?
Yeah,
the endpoints in the middle.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But and then the last one we have here is the title screen. It's 16 seconds long.
Oh.
And it plays Sonic CD music. Ba, 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 da, da.
No animation, though.
No, I mean, maybe this is just a static screen, but that's the music. Stardust Speedway.
I was gonna say, aren't you surprised that they didn't just tack on Sonic on there and just make it a Sonic puzzle game, like Sonic Swirl?
You bring up a good point, because I always thought it was strange that this game was kind of synonymous with the Dreamcast. It released in 2000 when the Dreamcast was in its prime. It's called SEGA Swirl. What kid, and even adult at the time, didn't call that logo the Dreamcast Swirl, or even the Sega Dreamcast Swirl, or the Sega Swirl? And yet in the game, it's not the Dreamcast logo.
No, it's not.
Why isn't it? That would have been the perfect to make a puzzle game utilizing the Dreamcast logo.
Right. Yeah, that's maybe because they always wanted to at least the Dreamcast version should have been the Dreamcast logo, you know what I mean? If they wanted
weird,
to
right?
put it in other consoles and other stuff, okay, change it. But if you're going to put it on the Dreamcast, it should be the Dreamcast logo, including the Europe one, and then red one, and then the red-orange one. Remember that?
And didn't the snake kind of look like the Dreamcast logo?
You're right. It's
when
like
he was kind of swirled up.
yeah. You know, to me,
know.
I always thought it was supposed to be the Dreamcast logo, and I just assumed it was, but it's not. Obviously, if you see it on the screen,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a hurricane from a top.
I think there needs to be T-shirts with the SEGA Swirl. I think that'd be
Which
pretty
color
sick.
though?
No, it would be like those like dad Hawaiian shirts with all the swirls.
Right.
I bet I could make that. I could make a SEGA Swirl Hawaiian shirt.
Is that?
I might do that.
Does Sega own the shape? Probably not, right?
They probably do, but it's like, what are they gonna do?
What color?
Sue me.
What colors are you gonna? Are you gonna use like a like?
Oh, all four.
Like dark
you do a
green?
black
Oh,
shirt,
gotcha.
black
Okay.
shirt, and then you do all four alternating all over your
See,
shirt.
I was thinking of it differently. I was thinking like, you know how they have those shirts where it's like dark green's the shirt, but then the logo's on there is like lighter green, so it's like barely visible. That's what I was thinking you were going for.
That'd be kind of sick too.
Yeah.
I'll think about this all night.
You're not gonna.
So how does
tonight.
Sega Swirl 2, how does it sound as a sequel, and do you want to play it based on what we know?
Man, when I saw this in the notes, I was like, did I miss Sega Swirl 2 on the Dreamcast? Like, there wasn't one, and now that you said it was just on GameTap, it's like, how did I miss this? I feel like, yes, I do want to play it. I think it's something in my life that I need to be fulfilled. So I hope someday it just randomly leaks. That'd be great. I'd download it and I'd play the living crap out of it.
And it's sad because Sega has a history, even to today, of letting games like this die. Most notably, Choo Choo Rocket Universe, which is it's the true sequel to Choo Choo Rocket. It was on Apple Arcade for 2 years, and then it disappeared.
I wish it had an
they pulled
Android
it.
version, because like at least with Android you could like pirate the APK, and I don't know if they do that with apps on the iPhone. So
You know, I had it on my desktop, and I was like, well, if I disconnect my internet and then launch it, it should work, because I think it checks. And it worked for a while, and then it was like, this game's incompatible. And I was like, what the f... And so I had it, I might still have it, like, downloaded, but sitting there, and it doesn't do anything. But I did take screenshots, like, the last time I played it, because I'm like, this might be, like, the last time I play this game, if it disappears tomorrow. And I really wish I did more playing of it, because it's kind of like the Sega Swirl 2. But I took... It's just a shame. And there's people who go, oh, it'll get a console port.
no, it won't.
I don't think
I
it will.
think
It
I think
won't.
it was funded by Apple for the Apple, and there's some sort of contract, and they and it was probably a decision from Apple. Probably didn't get enough downloads
Why
or
it's
buys.
gone. It's so weird, and yet that Sonic Racing is there. That's like a weird, bastardized version of Team Sonic Racing.
Let's be honest, though. That game is
yeah.
probably getting downloaded up the butt, and just because it's Sonic, that's literally why.
Should have called it Sonic Rocket or something, just like Sonic Swirl 2. So before we close things up, it's worth talking about other free games from Sega. Over the years, we saw demos with so much unique content that they acted as their own full game. We've also seen small games like SEGA Swirl included on demo discs as bonuses or given out free to fans to download. And of course, modern gaming has seen free-to-play games making titles like Sonic Dash technically a free game. But let's run through some notable ones and share our thoughts. Sega console pack-in games. Do you have any favorites here?
The pack-in games, like, are you talking about like when they gave out like Sonic Adventure with the Dreamcast, or they gave out that type of thing?
Sonic 1 with
The blue
Genesis,
the
yeah.
Well,
Altered Beast.
Right. I would say the Sonic ones were always really good. I know they did a Dreamcast with like a blue controller, blue VMU, and Sonic Adventure. That was crazy. Like that was a value that So
Yeah.
I think that would be my favorite because it actually had a VMU that was blue, and I wish they do that more, where they like give you exclusive content on a bundle. Now it's like more rare to get a game with your system, and if they do, it's a downloadable game, which is kind of lame in my opinion, not the physical version.
Right. Christmas Seaman comes to mind, where it was with the Christmas Dreamcast, which was like red and green and blue. There is the question, are those actually free? Because, like, you're still buying the console.
Right, but if it's the console costs the same if you didn't get it, it's a free add-on, I would say, so yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like it back in the day, though, because obviously it was a physical game. Nowadays, they, like, give you download codes.
Yeah.
And you're like, but, like, I bought the Xbox One X, I think it's called, and it came with Jedi Survivor, but it was a download code, and I was like, oh, that sucks. I want the disc.
And my brother bought, like, I think the PS4 Pro, but it was like the God of War edition one. But the game was, like, the game either didn't come with it, or it was he got the collector's edition. There you go, for God of War, but it didn't come with the game, so he had to buy the game separate, or it came with a downloadable code or something. But he was upset.
Nintendo goes all out, and they're like, I have the Wii U with the Zelda styling and everything, but the game's digital, and I'm like, oh, so you'll like do gold patterns on my gamepad, but you won't give me the disc. So,
they still do that. Like, if you buy the Mario Kart 8, it's digital. So
they did that terrible one where you pick. Remember that? They're like, you can pick one of 3. I'm like, you're not giving me 3.
Yeah, at this point, it's like 8 years old. Might as well, right?
Pick one. Christmas Nights for the Saturn.
Oh, that was sick.
We did an episode on that.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that's. I think that's peak of that era. It was a giveaway. They included it with magazines, and I think you could get it at stores too. I don't exactly remember how else you could get it, but yeah, it was a demo, but it had all these little mini games. It was just awesome, and they did include it in the recent version that came out to modern consoles, but I think it is missing some things. Like, I don't think Sonic's in it. I could be wrong.
I think you're right.
This one now, and I think we'll actually do a whole episode on Dreamcast Magazine demo discs. This one is Toy Commander Holiday Mission for the Dreamcast. Have you played this one?
Yeah, I did play this one. This is awesome.
Sweet.
I love Toy Commander. I think it's great. Just the perspective and playing in the house, looking at the poop in the litter box, that kind of stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah. A similar game I played was Mr. Mosquito. I rented it, though. I wish I bought it because it's super expensive now.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just so much fun flying around as Santa, like in a jetpack, like shooting at things. Super Boom Tread Troopers for the Dreamcast from Digital Eclipse. Have you heard about this weird one?
No, I never heard of this one.
It's essentially Combat, the game Combat.
Oh.
And the main character, like, there's like this woman who looks like a Russian, and so it's all these like different characters with little tanks. It's cute. It's free. Choo Choo Rocket for the Dreamcast. In Europe, it was given away for free to customers who visited the Dream Arena online service with the Dreamcast browser.
Oh.
Did you know this was free?
I did know that. I think we did a Choo Choo Rocket episode and you brought it up, so I did know that. But yeah, no, that's incredible value. I mean, in America, it was a budget game, right? So
I think it was like 20 or 30, yeah. But like, it's a full-blown game, so, and it's from Sonic Team. I did hear that in car boot sales, or, you know, like flea markets over there, it's like a $5 game. It's so cheap, people can't give them away because everyone had one. This is a favorite of mine, What's Shenmue for the Dreamcast in Japan.
Yeah, I've played this one. I didn't, obviously, because it was Japanese only. I like it because it really shows you an early glimpse on Shenmue, and it's interesting that people were set the hype around it, and the fact that they had to release its own thing. Isn't this the one that also has the bikes, or the like debug for the bikes? Yeah, okay.
You can kneel, which was removed, and there are people riding bikes, which was removed, and of course, man, I'm blanking on his name, but he passed away.
The president.
We reported on his passing, but he passed away a year prior, and they kept it quiet. But yeah, he was in all of those Dreamcast commercials. He kind of took over for Sega Sanshiro. So rest in peace.
Kind of a downgrade, in my opinion. Even though he's dead, I mean, I'm just saying it was kind of a downgrade. From
Yeah. I mean, the fact we can't remember his name. This is a big one for me. Jet Set Radio Future and Sega GT 2002 for the Xbox. This
is it. I think this, like, when those sweaters that we got from Sega a long time ago when they re-released Jet Set Radio. I wore it, and I got comments from people about Jet Set Radio Future that they had it on Xbox because of this pack-in. Like, so many people know Jet Set Radio because of this pack-in. So, definitely.
And it was such a great value. I mean, obviously, it's a combo disc of both games, but it had the controller Type S, which was new at the time because people didn't like the Duke.
Nobody liked it.
And I love the controller Type S because it felt like a better Dreamcast pad. It was
perfect.
It was
a perfect 3D controller. That's what it was.
Yeah. And it came with the sequel to one of my favorite Sega games and then a racing game that I played occasionally.
A couple times. I was just saying, what do you think about the nostalgia for the Duke coming back?
For who? Oh,
the Duke.
That's really interesting. I want a Type S coming back. I don't want the Duke.
Right, that's what I'm saying. But people are been like, I think Retrobit did a version of it, or somebody did a version of it. That's like, I don't know about that.
Well, I've got like kind of the Sega equivalent, the Heavy Sixer, the Big Six, or whatever you call it, where it's kind of the best of both worlds. But this feels really good. And when I was a kid, I always found the Genesis Big Pad to be too big for my hands. But now that I'm an alpha male.
An alpha male with full-size hands.
I have big hands. It feels great. But, that combo. And what's funny is Jet Set Radio on its own is actually very hard to find.
Right.
It's kind of like finding a copy of Sonic 1 without the not for resale. It's like, it's not rare, but it's not easy to find. And if someone is selling it, they sometimes think, ooh, I got something that I don't see that much online, so I'm going to jack the price up.
I was about 80%
Rappy Bird.
Rappy Bird on browser? Is that a Sega one?
It was an April Fool's game, which was Flappy Bird, but with a Rag Rappy from Phantasy Star.
Oh, yeah. Okay, and you didn't put it here, but there was also the Bayonetta one that they released on... but I think that was for promotion for Bayonetta 2, so it might be more Nintendo-based, but Bayonetta got a fun game. Remember? It was like...
It did.
Yeah, so...
And then there was quite a few for Go Sega. There was Sega's 60th anniversary. There was Golden Axed, a canceled prototype on Steam, which actually angered some of the original development team because they didn't know it was being released, and they also didn't like the title being changed. But it's like, it's fine.
Sega owns the prototype.
They own it. Golden Axed. I don't think it was done in malice. I think they're just like, it was canceled.
It's a pretty funny name though if you think about it. And remember when we covered this randomly in our blog about this shared Sega universe before the Marvel shared universe?
Oh yeah, that was wild. And that was one of the pitches there. There was also Endless Zone on Steam, which was, I've never really gotten into these or know much about them, but I guess Endless. It's a franchise that Sega recently purchased, and so this was Fantasy Zone, but using Endless assets.
So I own Endless Space too, and I try to get into it, and it's like, you have to read so much, and it's like one of those things where you pick a race, and then you have to read all the background on the race, and what their powers are, and I was just like, yeah, I don't have time for this right now, I just want to get into a game real quick, but thank you.
Right. But Endless Zone is probably the most playable game in the franchise for you then.
Well, they're doing Endless Dungeon soon, I think, or it's coming out this year, and it's just a dungeon 4-player co-op game. There's nothing to do with that. Cool. So, I guess it's a brand. Endless is a brand.
Endless is a brand. You know what else is a brand? Is Yakuza Streets of Kamurocho on Steam, and this one was Streets of Rage Yakuza. This one stood out. I think this was the best one of that whole whole thing, but it was one stage, right?
Right, and I like Golden Axe just because it was a canceled prototype, and I think Sega should be releasing more prototypes like this, and maybe just pitch videos that they got in the past. I don't think there's
like Sonic Extreme, the skateboarding one. That would have been sweet.
Oh yeah, that would have been a good one. Or I would always wish that they would just show like a video of the like pitches they've gotten for Jet Set Radio over the years, because I'm sure they've gotten some crazy stuff over the years that we haven't seen. But yeah.
There's also Armor of Heroes, which I don't remember. It's like forgettable, right?
It's a top-down tank shooter. I think you were saying that you like, the armor was weird on it. I remember you mentioning it. So the fact that you played it and complained about it and then forgot about it really kind of tells you everything about it.
I think though if I remember correctly, I might have brought up Super Boom Tread Troopers, because it's kind of like that, where it's a top-down. Right. Yeah, it is kind of weird. I just like saying Super Boom Tread Troopers, to be honest. This next one is the most popular one. This is, The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog on Steam.
The meme game.
I haven't finished that. I haven't played much of it. It's like, if you give me something free, I'm not going to gobble it up.
You're like, I didn't pay money for this, I could play it later.
Exactly. But this one does star a badger, I think, and his default name is Barry.
Oh, there you go. For you.
It's me.
I was going to say, that's interesting. It kind of makes me wish that they would finish the Big Fishing Adventure 3 game one day, forever, maybe. I think it's cool that they're doing this free Sonic games. I think this is going to start having a trend for Sega because of how the reception it had. Maybe, like, do one every time a big Sonic release happens, like the next Frontiers game. Maybe they'll have The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and then just end it with buy Sonic Frontiers 2, guys, after you guys, like, 1 million people play it. So,
right.
Yeah. I think it's cool.
That one was super popular. They put a lot of work into that. So it's proof that Sega will, like, have time and energy and a budget for free things just for PR.
Right.
And that brings us to one of my last questions. What do you see as the future of free games, specifically with Sega, as consoles and distribution platforms evolve?
Well, I mean, would Phantasy Star Online 2 be a free game?
It would be. It's free to play.
Yeah. I think it's obviously the future now because everybody's doing it, but as a free game, like I think like something like The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog, where they like take memes, because the power of memes for some reason could sell stuff. Like Barbie, literally's advertisement of memes that fans created, this Oppenheimer Barbie whatever
Barbieheimer
thing.
Yeah,
Barbieheimer is so powerful that it literally sold movies tickets. Like, I think they're saying that it's going to cross 1 billion easy. A movie about Barbie.
End of September, I will be in the theaters watching Paw Patrol 2 and Saw 10 for Saw Patrol weekend. It's going to be epic.
What do you think about the... Yeah. Well, there's also TMNT, which looks pretty interesting, in my opinion. We'll see.
Yeah, Saw Patrol. I think Saw Patrol is
Saw Patrol.
That's what it is. You sit down, you watch it. You get whiplash. You go from G to R. It's great.
Well, we'll see. I think it's weird to release a Saw movie and it's not October, but we'll see how it does.
Yeah, it was going to be October, but I think it was going up against Five Nights at Freddy, and so they didn't want to get cannibalized by that. But come on, Saw.
Five Nights with Freddy. I'm good. I've seen the game online. I'm good. I don't think I need to see a movie.
No, you need to go see Saw. I think the future is really like capitalizing on fan bases, memes, trying to drum up like noise and attention for your brand, and the easiest way to do that is through free content. And, you know, in the case of movies and TV shows, there's always, like, free YouTube shorts. And to be quite honest, some stuff is essentially free because, you know, you can download it. It's just a movie. But with video games, it is it is a lot of work to create content that is then given away for free, especially, when you move outside of the realm of free to play. And that's why I didn't include PSO2 and a lot of mobile stuff, because end of the day, they still want your money.
Right.
And to fully experience it, you still need to give them money. Same goes with Apple Arcade games. If you're in the Apple ecosystem, Apple Arcade is essentially free because it's included with just about every subscription package. Like if you're like, oh, I really want 10, I want 200 gigs of storage on the cloud, they'd be like, okay, and here's Apple TV Plus and here's Apple Arcade for free, essentially, because it's not like I was looking for those services.
And if we're going to count that, then we should just, we might as well count, all the Disney Plus shows. Like, are those free? Not really. You're paying for them, technically.
No, and you're paying for the service.
Right.
But in the case of Sega, Sonic Mania Adventures is free, but it's video content,
right? Not
playable. But yeah, I think as marketing methods, and that's how things have changed. I think back in the day, like with Sega Swirl, it was more to market the capabilities of the console. It's not like anyone was making memes about Swirly the Snake or talking about it online. It was more like it was this puzzle game that could hopefully maybe get your parents to play because it's super simple.
Showed off the Dreamcast's features.
Exactly. And that's what the Sonic Adventure did very well. It showcased almost everything the Dreamcast could do. But Sega Swirl was a nice, free way to see what if you had 4 controllers, you'd be like, oh, let's play Sega Swirl. But that's the evolution. And I guess my final thoughts on both Sega Swirl and Snail Maze is that they're both good for what they are. I don't want to compare the two because they're two very different things. One's like an Easter egg, essentially, and the other one is, I guess we're going to be saying Sega Swirl is kind of like a showcase of some of the Dreamcast's abilities on the browser disk and other methods.
It does show you the evolution of what a free game is, right? The other one's in the 80s, and this one's in the early 2000s, and it shows you the big leap in what was considered free. Obviously, Swirl is higher quality because of the technology and how it's evolved, and it wasn't in a BIOS screen that just had limited memory. So,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
But imagine if the Dreamcast came preloaded with Sega Swirl.
It should have, and then it should have been full online play.
Because then you have that menu system. Imagine if they did a revision, like Dreamcast Revision 2, and you boot up your Dreamcast, and it has the VMU icon, settings, launch your software, Sega Swirl. And it's like a built-in game with the email component. That would have been beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
What could have been? If you support us on Patreon at any tier, you can share your memories, and we read them at the end. Of course, if you're the picker, we'll read your memories at the beginning. But on this episode, we have 4 people with some extensive memories about free games.
Wow.
So Michael S. says, Sega Swirl was a lot of fun. I thought it was so cool having a free game on the Dreamcast. Christmas Nights is one of my favorite games. I try to play it every holiday season on Xbox. It's short and very festive. I've never heard of Toy Commander Holiday, but really enjoyed the game on Dreamcast. So yeah, Michael, if you want Toy Commander Holiday, you got to hunt down a specific Dreamcast demo disc. Ben Hayward says, as much as I've joked about Snail Maze on Patreon before, the free game that defined my childhood Sega experience was Alex Kidd in Miracle World. It's definitely not for everyone, but it's my family's first ever Master System game, coming built into the Master System 2 here in Australia. A lot of my friends had either the Master System 1 or 2, and it was common knowledge amongst all of us that only the Master System 2 had the built-in game. So when my friend told me there was a code you could use on the 1 to get a hidden game, my mind was blown, and that's when Snail Maze came into my life too. Thanks for taking on such a cool topic for this episode. And yeah, Ben makes... I understand it now. So when you boot up the console, it would go like a game was already in there. But if you want to try Snail Maze, you need to hold down 1, 2, and up during the Sega logo. So there is no welcome to the Master System checklist screen. That's interesting. Nicholas Schaefer says, I've never played Snail Maze, and he does the snail emoji, but it has been a game I was hoping you would cover ever since you started joking about it. As for free game, I bought a Dreamcast on the day it was canceled and got the Sonic bundle for $200. It came with Sonic Adventure, Sonic Shuffle, but the game we played through that night was the Sonic Adventure 2 demo with City Escape.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a... Did that come with the demo too?
I don't know. I know it came with PSO for sure.
Oh yeah, no, and I considered putting that in there, but it's like it's just a demo.
It's just the best demo disc of all time. That's all.
It is the best demo disc of all time. He says, it's just a demo, but me and my friends took turns playing it for about 5 hours. I don't think I've ever gotten that much use out of a free pack-in, with the exception of Wii Sports. I think it alone made me feel like the right choice in getting a Dreamcast. And then we have Daniel Andres, who always has some sort of he says,
opener?
Oh, jeez. Yeah, he goes, oh, jeez.
Why, guys?
Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez, guys. It's finally time. You guys are finally doing this. Well, as far as free pack-in games that come with game consoles, really the only one that I truly got to experience of are Sonic 1 and 2. Again, those are the first two games that I've ever played when I was only 4 years old. They weren't technically the pack-in titles. My uncle had a Genesis that was packed in with Altered Beast. Although I didn't play that one as a kid, he indeed owns the resale copies of Sonic 1 and 2. I own my own as well now, but it took forever to find a resale copy of Sonic 1. So he actually... So it was actually hard for him to find a resale. Oh, so the regular copy. I never thought of it as resale. I bought a resale game today. Oh,
no,
yeah?
Just the regular version is what I was...
A regular one. I like resale. I'm going to start calling every game a resale game. And I'll be like, oh yeah, this is a sweet resale game. As for the other games, I have experienced all to most of them, but I had to obtain them separate from the purchasing the systems themselves, so I don't really think that counts as a free experience. Oh, that's right. Snail Maze is built into the Master System. Yes, when I first discovered that, it was awesome. When I got around to playing it, yes, SEGA Swirl is also a lot of fun. I also absolutely do love Christmas Nights, and I do think that a copy may have come with my Christmas Japanese Saturn. I can't remember, though. And we actually threw people could vote if they were on Team Snail Maze or SEGA Swirl.
SEGA Swirl won.
And
come on.
SEGA Swirl did win. It was 53 votes. Final results, 52.8%.
Wow, it was closer
was
than
Swirly the Snake. Yeah, 47.2 was that Snail. You know, it's kind of like elections. You're like, oh, Swirly's got this. Then you're like, oh man, there's a lot of...
Oh my god. The South really loves snails, I guess.
Oh yeah, well, it's free, man. Snail Maze.
That's a real free game.
So, it is a real free game. So, George, what are we talking about next time on 125?
I haven't decided, but I'm going to do what I did last time. I'm going to put a pool with 4 unique ideas on our Patreon. So if you want to vote and see these ideas, you should go on to patreon.com/SegaBits. I might put the Sonic toy idea back up again. That was pretty popular, but I'm going to sit and think about a few more unique ideas that I think are going to be interesting. So if you guys want to participate, check us out on www.patreon.com/SegaBits and support the show. Thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll catch you guys next time. Bye.
Bye. Snail Maze.